Hey all, welcome back to my channel. My name's Kate if you're new. Happy to have you here. So we are now about halfway through the year, which means that it is time for my second quarterly wrap up. So this is going to be everything I read in April through June. So I have a total of 8 books to talk about today. 3 of which I read in April, 3 in May, and then only 2 in June. Like last quarterly wrap up, I am going to be going chronologically in when I read them. However, before we jump into the video, I do have a quick life update. We lost our old pit bull Hubert about 2 years ago, and then we lost my old cat, friend of the channel Smudge, about 18 months ago. And since then, we have just taken some time to, connect with the cats that we have and mourn our loss and all of that. But we very recently opened our house again to a new dog. So we recently welcomed in our new tripod rescue Frenchie named Ellipses, Ipsy for short. And she is probably gonna just be snuffling around while I film because she is a little Velcro dog and doesn't like being away from her people. So to jump into the wrap up, technically in April, I did also finish Mirrored Heaven, which was the 3rd book of the Black Sun trilogy. However, I already talked about that in my last quarterly wrap up. So the next book that we have to talk about is Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. This one I also mentioned at the end of my last quarterly wrap up as one that I had already finished, but just was going to talk about later. I have been getting recommended this book a lot through BookTube and Book Talk and all of those kinds of things. And everyone was describing it as, dark academia, kind of some enemies to lovers kind of aspects to it, but that it was just this really good fantasy standalone. And so I requested this from my library, read it within a week. The premise of Blood Over Brighthaven is that our main character, Siona, is this prodigy of the essentially magic university, and she is the first woman to pass the examinations to become a full master. Now, her male colleagues aren't too thrilled about her passing the examinations, and so instead of giving her a proper assistant, she is given essentially a janitor who was just kind of cleaning in her office at the time. Now, the thing about this janitor character, Tomil, is that we actually spent our first chapter with him, the prologue, several years before the sort of main thrust of this book, where he and his clan are attempting to get to the city that has this university and is protected from this thing called the Blight with a capital B. We watch as instead his entire clan, except him and his niece, are taken by the Blight as they're trying to get to this city. It is a horrific opening scene, and then we very quickly whiplash to Siona and academia politics. Having read the entire book, I completely understand why she did that, because part of what we're seeing from Tomil's perspective is the horror of the loss of all of his people. This book was really close to being a 5-star. The reason that for me it was a 4.5 is that I figured out the big kind of emotional plot twist about kind of the world and the magic system. I figured all of that out basically within the first chapter. And therefore, the whole metaphor of the story felt a little heavy-handed because I saw it coming for so long. But none of that takes away from the really good character work, the really interesting world building, where for me, even though it was technically an otherworld fantasy, it read like an urban fantasy in our world that was just a historical, Victorian almost, kind of Sherlock Holmesy time period almost, except that it was a completely other world. Also, just speaking of heavy-handed, I found Siona's name a little heavy-handed because she is the scion, the new generation. Anyway, what I did like about this though is that Siona has to go through a reckoning about what the world is doing and kind of the inequality of the world. And I really appreciated seeing her journey of seeing how far the rot goes, and having seen how far the rot goes, her absolute rejection of the entire structure. I also did really enjoy Tomil and his niece and their kind of generational struggles. He has had to sacrifice so much to be able to raise his niece, but he raised her kind of in the traditions of his own people, which means that she is a very fiery, free-spirited girl in a society that really doesn't want people of her ethnic group to be that way. So anyway, I really, really loved this book. There were just a few things that kept it from being a 5-star, but fully recommend. All right, next is going to be one of the few that I actually still have in physical copy versus I checked it out of the library and now it's back at the library. We have The Jasmine Throne and The Oleander Sword. Now, I did read these back to back. There is one more book in the series that I do own. I have not read it yet because after reading these 2 back to back, I was on the verge of hitting a reading slump and really needed a break. In book 1, we have 2 main characters, which are Priya, and Malini. Priya is a servant girl. She used to be a temple child before the temple was burned with most of the children inside it. This happened when she was very young. Her time as a temple child left her with like a little bit of magical powers, but she is living in the household of one of her previous temple siblings who left the temple to get married to like the head of the state, essentially. The empire that they are a part of is this kind of kingdom of kingdoms where there's the main capital in the center and then 5 kind of vassal states, but they all have some measures of independence and they all also have like their own kings. Our other main character in this book is Princess Malini, who is princess to the despotic ruler. I really liked a lot of this series. I really liked the world building and the magic systems. I liked a lot of the characters. I liked the root plant curse that like slowly turns people into like tree people. There's also just a big theme about brothers in this series that I really enjoyed, like particularly despotic brothers. Malini has her like Sultan brother, I can't remember the title, who in the prologue is like burning her companions, like the girls that she grew up with, her handmaidens, which just like trigger warnings, there's a lot of women burning in this series. Like a lot of women get burned. Unfortunately, the things that didn't work for me is that like, 1, I think this book is just too long. And 2, Princess Malini, our other main character, is kind of a nothing burger of a character for a while, because her very first scene, the prologue, is her being dragged in front of her brother as the result of a failed coup, which means that we didn't see any of the actual behind the scenes action of her like gathering allies and building support and doing all of like the proactive action part. We just see her getting captured and drugged and imprisoned. And so she does so little to actually advance the plot. She's a little bit of a sexy lamp in this book, which if you're not familiar with that phrase, it's the concept of like, could this female character be replaced by a sexy lamp and would anything really change? In book 1, not much would change. And so like really Malini doesn't do much to affect the plot until like the end of this book. There's like a very distinct plot point near the end where she finally makes a decision. It takes a long time to get there. Then we get into book 2, which I'm obviously not going to go into too much for spoiler reasons, but again, Malini gets sidelined for like most of the book. There's this whole military campaign that she's supposed to be leading, but we see her like riding up to start the campaign. And then the next time we circle back around to her POV, because there's a bunch more POVs in this book, the next time we circle back around to her POV, it's like 6 months later and that battle is over. And so like similar to in book 1, where they kept telling us about how she was so charismatic and was able to reel people in and make them her allies. They kept telling us that. We never actually fucking saw it. In book 2, the only time we actually like see her run a battle is the one where there's a twist and they have to retreat. So like, again, she's completely sidelined. I don't know why they keep doing this to her, but they keep telling us that she's super cool and then showing us nothing. Man, the brother issues continue in book 2 though. There's tyrants we gotta take down. There's ones that were doomed by the narrative from the start. Like there's also, there's like a secondary kind of romance plotline running through this book that is like straight, and yet I honestly kind of cared more about them than I did about Priya and Malini. This book also unfortunately kind of suffered from middle book makeout syndrome, where like the plot doesn't really advance much because we can't do that until book 3. So we just spend book 2 fucking around with like relationship stuff. So anyway, I like so much of this series. I'm rating it 4 stars, but they are too long. They need to be edited down. And also, like, give Malini something to do. My God, she doesn't do anything for 80% of the book and then finally makes a decision right at the end. Both times. All right, my guys. So next up, I did a bunch of reading book 1 of a duology this last quarter. So the first one of these is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. Overall, I really liked this one. It is very much amusing on like generational trauma and cycles of violence and prejudice that springs up of generational trauma and cycles of violence. Our main character, Jack, is a bard that was growing up on this magical island that has these magical spirits that are all like elemental based. He was sent away to a college on the mainland, and the story begins when he is coming back to his island for the first time in I think about 10 years. On this island, there are two clans essentially that generations ago, I forget exactly how many at this point, there was some kind of rupture where one person was sent over and married over to this other clan, and then someone ended up dead, and now everybody hates everybody, right? There has been a wall dividing the island. One clan lives on one side, the other clan lives on the other. If they cross the border, they kill each other. So very obvious that this island is on rocky foundation that cannot stand. And our story kicks off when Jack gets back to this island and re-meets up with his kind of school rival-ish called Adira, and she is the heir to essentially like the chief. I forget what title they have. Jack and Adira very quickly and obviously become our first main couple, but our kind of other couple and kind of secondary main characters are actually characters that have been married for quite some time. So they are Torin, who is kind of like the captain of the guard, and then his wife Sidra, who is kind of like the village healer. And they married when Torin's previous wife died in childbirth, and he pragmatically was like, I need to find a mother for my child. And so, you know, they describe like how their wedding night, instead of like going to bed, they like sat up all night and talked about how they were going to raise this child together. And I found their dynamic very interesting as well. Torin is also kind of grappling with the history of his own violence, the fact that he has killed people from this other clan before, and maybe he didn't really want to, and maybe he's realizing that he doesn't want to continue doing that. And so there were a lot of investigations into like, what does it take for people to change? Now, I haven't finished the duology. I do have the second book of the duology, A Fire Endless. My one thing is that this author seems to like doing this thing where at the end of book one, she splits up our main couple geographically and then does a big time skip. So like, I will admit my enthusiasm did get a little bit dimmed when it came to starting book two, which is why I haven't finished it already. But I really liked a lot of the writing. I liked the kind of themes and issues that she was grappling with. I liked her characters. So I am definitely going to get to book two. I don't love when authors do that. When they're like, oh, okay, we got together in book one. Now let's split you apart for book two. Cool, thanks. The next book that I finished this quarter was The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. I talked about this one very briefly in my like library book vlog. I picked this one up because I've been in kind of a nostalgic 2016 mood. And I went back and looked at what I was reading in 2016 and found that I had read, what was it? Labyrinth Lost, there we go, by, at the time, debut author Zoraida Cordova. And my opinion at the time was like, good for a debut, but not great, and I wanted a little bit more. So I decided to give her recently published adult fantasy a chance, and I'm really glad I did. I really liked this one. Now, this book was very character focused, mostly on a couple branches of this big sprawling family tree that is in the front of the book, which I did really like. But the family tree kind of all centers around this grandmother matriarch, Orquídea Divina, who immigrated to the US, found her like plot of land, set up her house, and basically never left. And the book starts with a few of her family members that we're following getting pre-written invitations to Orquídea Divina's funeral written by her. Now, pretty much part one is all leading up to and culminating in this funeral that Orquídea Divina has predicted, which means that we spend a lot of time, like we see a character get the invitation, and then we back way up and we kind of follow them through their lives and their relationship with Orquídea and how they ended up where they are now, and then how they're going to get over to Orquídea's place, right? Like, and we do this kind of multiple times. Like we meet Marisol, who is kind of our kind of main character. We meet her cousin that she's living with. There is their cousin Tatinelli, who kind of left the family and went to the Pacific Northwest. And so we just spend a lot of time getting to know these characters, getting to know their family, all these different dynamics that they've got. And then it kind of culminates in the funeral. And then part two, there's like a big 7-year time skip. And then again, we spend time like getting to know what Marisol has been up to in that time, getting to know what her cousins have been getting up to in this time. And so like this is going to be kind of a deep cut, but like it almost felt Dickensian to me in the way that we spend so much time with the lives of these characters and we follow them through time and we kind of keep circling back to them and catching up with them in a way that, yeah, really reminded me of a lot of Dickens novels, especially one like David Copperfield, where it's like just following his life. You just get this kind of 360 view of the person, as my Dickens professor called it. And then kind of throughout this story of Marisol and her cousins and this kind of curse that seems to be coming from members of the family, we also get these flashbacks of Orchidea's life. We get parts of her childhood, adolescence, and then some parts of her like young adulthood and her like first marriage, which we know that she's had many, many husbands throughout her lives. A lot of these branches are like kids that she had with the different husbands. And so through that, we kind of realize what this curse is that has been haunting her family for generations. The magic was very magical realism, not really explained at all. When the characters get magic, they just kind of have it and they don't really know how it works. There's also at one point kind of a plant body modification thing happening. So weird book, kind of a slow book, but in a way that I really liked. Now, the next one to talk about is one that I pretty much read on camera, which was We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal. This one, unfortunately, was kind of a disappointment for me. I struggled to really invest in the characters. Zafira is our female main character. She is a huntress who has been disguising herself as a man, but she has been hunting in this like magical cursed forest. But that has been how she has been kind of supporting her village and her people, is like she'll bring back deer. Honestly, I mostly liked the world building in this one. I still don't totally understand the purpose of having essentially elves, but just called by a different name. They're called Safin. Like, there might be a plot reason why we need to have immortals, but it just felt kind of weird to have just one of these kingdoms of kingdoms. Because again, this is a system where there's like one main leader and then a bunch of little vassal states. Just one of those vassal states, the people there are immortal elves. I don't know. But you know, the rest of it I liked. There was like a spooky forest and a desert island filled with demons and like fun stuff like that. I was kind of over Nasir, our male main character. He has just this whole like tortured assassin kind of thing going on that I just honestly was a little bored by. I don't think there was really anything wrong with Nasir's characterization. I just personally found it a little boring. And even a lot of the side characters just felt, I don't know, a little flat, a little caricature-y. Unfortunately, the thing that really bogged this book down for me was, one, again, I think maybe could have been shortened a little bit, but two, there was just clumsy writing in it that would really throw me out of the story. Like, there was an instance that I mentioned in the vlog that was like something shattered in his unfeeling eyes. And like, I think what they meant is like something shattered in his usually unfeeling eyes or previously unfeeling eyes. But it didn't say that. It just said something shattered in his unfeeling eyes, and unfeeling eyes can't shatter. That's not how that works. So there were multiple instances like that. There were also moments where like we're just getting random thoughts in our main character's head that don't relate to anything. Like, they trekked and tracked for 5 whole days. No, not tracking. Zafira was no tracker. She was a hunter. She hunted. But hunters tracked and trackers hunted, didn't they? Where are you going with that? Zafira tilted her head and imagined her thoughts shifting into a box she closed tight. So like literally she was just spinning out a random thought in her brain, and somehow that was important enough that it took up an entire paragraph. Ugh. Also, they do this thing where it's like really short fragments that's an entire paragraph. Their lips touched, once, barely, twice, scarcely, and her world disappeared. If you're gonna do that once. This book does it like 8 times. There is potential here. It had good atmosphere. I just needed a little more work on the characters and frankly, just another pass with an editor. Like, I am probably going to read book 2 because I don't want to leave a duology unfinished. That just feels inherently unsatisfying in my brain. But like, I'm not thrilled about it. All right, now, the second to last book that I read in this second quarter is Thrice Married to a Salted Fish, Volume 3. I think I've talked about this book series in every video I've made this year, so I really don't want to belabor the point, but in case you haven't seen any of my previous videos, this is a Chinese Danmei novel, which means it is a Achillean romance, male-male, and this particular story is a transmigration story, which means a character from our world got transmigrated into the world of a fictional novel that they have read. However, this series does a fun little twist on that genre where our main point of view character is not actually the person that transmigrated. They are just a character, a person living in this world who also, it turns out, was like a minor villain in the original series. Now, our main pairing is very much kind of like Sunny Golden Retriever. That is our transmigrator character. He just wants to have snacks, play games, have a good time, right? And then our point of view character is very much Ice Princess Black Cat, wants to poison everyone. And what is really great about this pairing is that our Sunny Golden Retriever is like, you get him, baby. I like watching you poison people. Go for it. So their dynamic is delightful. There is one more volume in this series. It is not yet finished. However, it comes out in October, so it's only a few months away. And at the end of volume 3, I do feel like we're in a decent pausing place. Like we've finally kind of gotten through the majority of like their interpersonal relationship conflict. And now there's just kind of some external conflict that they need to deal with. Like some plot needs to happen. But the main like relationship drama is mostly resolved in this one. So I do think that now is a good time to start if you've been kind of waiting on it for like wanting there to be more books out. I feel like now is actually a good time to start, despite how fucking depressing this cover is. It's actually okay. Also, at one point, our like Ice Princess Black Cat literally passes out from having too many feelings. It's really, really good for me. All right, now our last book to talk about in this quarterly wrap-up is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. This was my first Alex E. Harrow novel, and it will probably not be the last. I really enjoyed this one. The story centers around our main character, Opal, who has been living in the town of Eden, Kentucky her entire life, which is a very much like rural Rust Belt dying town. And this book feels very much like a musing on like deep poverty and the Rust Belt and like the racism and horrific past that people choose to ignore and kind of the ghosts that that creates. The town of Eden, Kentucky seems to just be plagued by bad luck, and Opal has been taking care of her younger brother Jesper since their mom died, and she has just been kind of working shit jobs trying to save up money to send Jesper away to a school that, you know, will not be in a town that is full of coal dust that is aggravating his asthmatic lungs, when she kind of stumbles past and across this old storied house called Starling House in the town. And pretty much the attitude of most people at Eden, Kentucky is like, do not look at Starling House, do not talk about Starling House, do not acknowledge that Starling House exists. And she finds herself outside the gates, gripping them tightly, when this boy Arthur comes out and tells her to go away and never come back. And when she leaves, he remarks that she left blood on the gates, and then the blood kind of gets sucked into the gates, and he goes, ah, shit. And despite Arthur's kind of resistance to the idea, Opal does end up getting hired as the housekeeper for Starling House. So we have spooky, magical kind of sentient houses. We've got fixing up spooky, magical kind of sentient houses, which is a trope that I find delightful, but have rarely seen outside of Harry Potter fan fiction. So I was actually delighted to find it in an actually properly published fantasy novel. We also have just like so many ghosts haunting the narrative. If you're a fan of that kind of idea, man, is this going to be a story for you. Because we've got E. Starling, who was this author of this Victorian, like weird, kind of gory, like Edward Gorey-esque children's book that I think was called something like The Underland. I've forgotten the title. But she basically wrote this one book that became a weird cult bestseller, disappeared, no one knows what happened to her. There have just been wardens that kind of show up at Starling House whenever the house needs a new warden. So there's all these people haunting the narrative. There's E. Starling, Eleanor Starling. There are like the previous wardens of Starling House that exist in rumors throughout the town. There's her mom. There is like the old giant coal shovel called Big Jack that got buried in the hillside and now like nothing grows there. So yeah, I really liked the character work and like the place, the location work. This town felt like a real living, breathing town. And honestly, as I'm talking about it now, I'm realizing that Starling House and Blood over Brighthaven have some similarities in kind of the sense of like, we need to get to the truth of the world and expose it in order to have any chance of healing anything. But that is going to be everything for this quarterly wrap up. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a like or a comment. If you're not sure what to comment, tell me either the best or the worst book you read in the last month or so, and I will see you guys very soon with another video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.